Hey, everybody. We're going to talk about one of the important and essential functions of being alive, one that we haven't really talked much about indirectly when we talked about gas exchange, but we're going to dig in a little deeper on excretion today. But I wanted to frame things by touching on some sort of common knowledge and some of the learning that we've already done to give you a sense, I hope, a broader appreciation of like most of what it is to be alive as an animal relates to this big idea of homeostasis that we are trying to maintain a set of relatively constant conditions inside our bodies, and that those constant conditions that we're working hard to maintain are the conditions necessary for our cells to thrive, for them to be alive and to function efficiently. So, what do living animals do? What do humans do as just sort of a basic fundamental part of being alive? Well, we eat, right? We take in food. We do that from essentially the first day of our life until the day we die. And that process, that activity, is done by our digestive system. And if you'd like to know more about that, plenty of information available to you, and something that some people might want to do for a personal learning project. And we eat initially as babies and as children to provide the building blocks to make our bodies grow to get to our adult size and adult form. But even as children, and certainly once we've reached our full size, we eat to basically replace nutrients that get lost, small amounts, but to mostly provide energy. Energy molecules like glucose, which are used to drive cellular respiration. So to keep the supplies of those energy molecules like glucose, we eat, because those molecules get used up constantly as our cells perform cellular respiration to make the ATP they need to keep functioning. Another very animal like activity is egestion. That's the scientific word for going number two. And that is not excretion. That is getting rid of the stuff that never really entered our body. It never passed through the wall of our digestive system. So our digestive system is a long continuous tube from our mouth to our anus, and the stuff that doesn't get digested and absorbed into our body just stays in the tube and winds up coming out the other end. That's egestion. So that's just getting rid of the stuff that we can't use anyway. Breathing, we've talked about. Respiratory system does that. Gas exchange taking place in the lungs. And that's maintaining homeostasis for those two important gases. The oxygen, that's the nutrient that's required to do cellular respiration, aerobic cellular respiration specifically. And the carbon dioxide, that is the waste product of respiration that we have to get rid of because we are continuously making it. Our heartbeat, certainly a beating heart is a sign of life, and the heart is the driving force of our circulatory system that moves stuff around our body, making sure that all the nutrients that we gather in our digestive system and through our respiratory system get distributed to all the parts of our body, and so that all the waste molecules that we make doing the processes of life get taken to the places where they can be excreted, where we can get rid of them. The lungs, in the case of CO2, and the kidneys, in the case of other waste products. So that leads to the last activity, urinating. Animals go pee-pee, and we do that to get rid of waste products that are in our blood. And for mammals and for humans, that means our kidneys do this work of taking the liquid part of our blood, separating out the wastes from the nutrients that are in the blood, and getting those waste products into a form that can be excreted from the body. And that form for us is urine. The urine is made in the kidneys, passed on to the bladder, and eventually passed out of our bodies through our urethras when we go pee pee. So kidneys are absolutely essential organs. If you think about, like, if you're going to shut down an organ, what's going to kill a person fastest? Well, if you shut down the heart or the brain, that's going to be a matter of minutes before the person is dead. If you shut down the lungs, that within minutes is going to cause a person to die. And probably next in line would be the kidneys. It's going to take a couple of days rather than minutes, but if our kidneys aren't continuously separating out those wastes and getting rid of them in the form of urine, within a couple of days, our bodies will basically poison themselves and will die from the toxic buildup of all of those waste molecules. And we'll talk about how the kidneys work in some detail in a few minutes. Two big functions performed by the kidneys. And the excretory function is the one we'll focus on, but the other one is super important too, and it relates to homeostasis. And it's got a funny name, osmoregulation. Osmoregulation is balancing the amounts of water and salt in our blood and body fluids. And that homeostasis is hugely important because all of our cells are bathed in blood and or body fluid. And so if, as we learned earlier in the year, a cell is surrounded by a medium that's very watery, like if you put a cell into pure water, osmosis will take place, water will enter the cell, and the cell can blow up like a balloon. It can rupture, in fact, and spill its guts into the environment. Conversely, if a cell is in an environment that is too salty, if there are higher concentrations of dissolved substances in that water than in the cell, then that cell can lose water by osmosis and it can shrivel up like a raisin. Neither one of those is good for our cells, so we continuously adjust the amounts of water and salts that are dissolved in our blood and therefore in our body fluids. So that's osmoregulation. And then the big function of excreting waste, and that's what we'll focus on over the next few minutes and the next few days. I left this slide on here because if you're interested, love to talk to you about animals like the kangaroo rat. The kangaroo rat's an excellent example, but it shows you how two very closely related animals, a human and a kangaroo rat, can have very different ways that they have to interact with their environment. We tend to have access to quite a significant supply of water, so we get lots of water through our food and through drinking. If you look at the kangaroo rat, it gets no water through drinking. It gets a little bit of water through the dry seeds that it tends to eat. And most of its water it gets by doing chemical reactions in its cells. And that's the only way that kangaroo rats and other desert adapted animals can survive. They don't have access to water to drink, so they have to conserve water and to get water in other ways. Okay, so what do we need to excrete from our blood, and what is it that the kidneys are helping us to get rid of? Well, the primary thing that we are excreting by producing urine that we get rid of is a category of waste molecules that contain nitrogen atoms. These nitrogenous wastes are mainly produced as we break down proteins in our diet. And most folks who have a Western diet, certainly probably everyone in our class and everyone in our school, gets much more than enough protein in their diet. We have more protein than we need to replace the proteins that we might break and need to replace in our cells, or as we're growing more protein than we need to build up some new cells. So we get more than enough protein, but we don't want to just throw out the excess protein because those molecules can be useful as a source of energy. And when we break down proteins to use them for energy, we produce these nitrogenous wastes. And the nitrogenous wastes are toxic, and we have to get rid of them before they build up in high concentrations that can be poisonous. And different animals use different forms of nitrogenous waste molecules depending on their circumstances. If you're an animal like a freshwater fish, you just take the raw toxic ammonia that is produced when we break down proteins and amino acids, because you're surrounded by water, so you can dilute your toxic ammonia with lots of excess water so it doesn't reach poisonous levels in your blood. So freshwater fishes are constantly just excreting tiny amounts of ammonia with plenty of water because they've got water to spare. Most animals that live on land convert their nitrogenous waste products to urea. This requires some energy, but urea is much less toxic, so we don't have to use so much water to get rid of it. And then some animals, birds, many reptiles, go a step further, use even more energy to produce an even less toxic version of the nitrogenous waste, and that's called uric acid. And uric acid precipitates into crystals of solid that are essentially totally non-toxic, and the animals that produce uric acid don't go pee the way we do. Their excretion from their excretory system is a paste. It's crystals of uric acid in a very small amount of water. So depending on the animal's environment and their needs, they can use different types of nitrogenous waste products. We're going to talk about the functioning of the kidneys in some detail, but it involves these 4 basic functions. So what do our kidneys do to take the blood and separate out the waste products from all the good stuff that's dissolved in the blood? So I'm going to pause the video here on this slide, but I encourage you to take a look at this slide number 7 on the slide deck that I shared with you yesterday. In the notes section, there are some extended descriptions of filtration, reabsorption, secretion, and excretion, and we will talk about those next time, but I think this video is long enough already. See you later.